What do we know about both of these IPOs?
They're coming. They might come right on top of each other early next year, probably the first half. Even though, Dara Khosrowshahi, Uber's CEO, has been saying sometime we're targeting the second half of next year. I think they're both in a hurry to get out, and it looks like they could be sort of right on top of each other.
Really? So I thought Lyft was going to be first. Isn't that what we expected?
Strategically, that made sense for Lyft, but it seems like Uber might be trying to kind of rain on that parade. The tough thing for Lyft is Uber's the bigger company. They are in more things, and when Lyft goes out, I bet the questions will be from investors: what comes next? They have that core ride-hailing business, but look at Uber. They have food delivery. They have scooters. They have all of these other things. Lyft wanted to head off some of those questions by getting out first, but if Uber jumps the gun and pulls the trigger, they could not only cause a narrative problem for Lyft, but they could also cause a wallet share problem for Lyft, and that investors want Uber shares and not Lyft shares.
$120 billion valuation, though.
Right. So that is sort of the headline, what bankers are selling Uber. Maybe if, we lead your IPO, we could convince the world that that's what you're worth. So I think there'll be a lot of questions.
Be careful about that.
Right. They're setting a high expectation,
Yeah.
Yeah. Lyft, we have a target of around $25 billion relative to a sort of $15 billion last round valuation. That seems more plausible. But with Uber, the defense is, they have their ride sharing business, which is global. They have stakes in Didi, Yandex, Grab. They have a huge autonomous business. They have a food delivery business that they believe is bigger than Grubhub. You pick up all the pieces together, and then you start to have this story for why it's this huge company.
Talk to us about the politics of the banks here, because JP Morgan doing Lyft, that means they won't be part of Uber's IPO.
That's right. In the banking world, it's called being conflicted out. So Uber had kind of hoarded these relationships under the former CEO, Travis Kalanick. They'd said, if you work with us, you can't work with Lyft, or else you're not getting another mandate with us. So JP had actually been working with Uber for a while, but I guess they looked at the layout and assumed that Goldman and Morgan Stanley would end up with the lead roles over at Uber. That means a smaller fee share for JP Morgan. JP Morgan's consistently third behind those two other firms. So nabbing a lead left #1 slot on what could be one of the biggest IPOs of the year in the tech space is a good look for them. So that seems to be some of the behind the scenes machinations going on right now. And for Lyft, what I was told is if they get one of the top 3-tier banks, they're out the door, and it seems like that's what's happening.
So how is SoftBank going to play into this? Obviously this is, the international story that's developing by the second, but there's a lot of concerns now about SoftBank's connection to Saudi money, despite the fact that the Saudis continue to deny, that the government continue to deny that they are part or behind the disappearance of this journalist.
Right. I think at this point, Uber has the money. So much of the money they have is tied to the Saudis. They have $3.5 billion directly from the investment fund. So the SoftBank is only a small part of their trouble, and I think it's about managing those relationships. Obviously, I'd love to be in the board meeting where they have to sort of have it out over Dara Khosrowshahi's decision to leave the Saudi forum. But I don't think they can give the money back at this point, and so I think it's just sort of keeping their distance while realizing that they have a Saudi board member.
So there are reports that some other companies like Endeavor are considering that.
Right.
Are there broader concerns in the ecosystem among investors about the connection that SoftBank has to now so many companies in the tech ecosystem?
I hate to say this because the moral conundrum is so huge, but I question whether or not public market investors will look at this and say this is a problem. If the board, being on the board and having that kind of say in the boardroom, that could become a governance issue. The fact that they took the money in the past, I think less so. So, Uber's stake that they had, to Eric's point, is a lot bigger than the $400 million that Endeavor had. Mm-hmm. It's in the billions. It's harder to kind of give that back. But you know what? For public market investors, my gut says they're going to buy into the story of the company, and they're not going to care so much about these kind of broader governance issues, again, unless something comes out again, or if the execs align behind the Saudi government.
Right, and of course, still waiting for new information there. Eric Newcomer, Alex Barinka, thank you as always.